And it is time once again for another AEW Dynamite review here on the Mr. Warren Hayes Show. Hello! It is not El Hijo del Warren Hayes. It is good old-fashioned Warren Hayes here, this plain old vanilla version. But it's Halloween, at least, close to. And, people like Halloween. I like Halloween. So I figured, why not just, go out and wear the luchador mask. How about that? I decided that I was going to lucha it up today here on the review. Hope you're having a great day. Hope you're, if you're enjoying the Halloween, I hope you're having a good time. I don't know if you're having like parties. I don't know if you're trick-or-treating. Probably not. According to my demographics, you're, up on the YouTube channel, you are very likely not trick-or-treating. Or if you are, it's a little weird, but, all the more power to you. But Halloween's a fun time, a lot of people enjoy it. It's a very festive time of year, I find. I particularly enjoy diving a little more into horror films, which I enjoy. And it's always a good signifier, right? That the season, that the fall truly has arrived, and we're literally heading into the bleakest period of the year. But so might as well just have a little fun with it before going forward. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know how long the lucha mask is going to stay on. First of all, I don't have my glasses on, so it's like I need them for. I can read up close. Don't get me wrong, but it just makes things a little easier. Man, I don't know how they wrestle with masks on. They're probably maybe a little better designed than these mass-produced masks here, which already I find are. I've always found the all-in mask here that I'm wearing. I found that it, like, as far as a consumer good, a lucha mask produced just as like a souvenir, like merch that you buy. I think it's really well done. You have the full laces in the back with the flap, and it's like I think it's really well done. I don't know how luchadors do it. I don't know how they spend so much time under a mask, but I mean, good for them. I mean, I'm not paid to do it. They are. So yeah, I'm just saying. Look, I don't know how long I'm going to be hanging around with this mask, is what I'm saying here. I'm probably going to ditch the mask at some point. Might be sooner than later, quite frankly. But let's see. Place your bets. Let's see how long the mask stays on. And please don't scroll ahead to figure it out and cheat. So we are going to be talking about the October 29, 2025 edition of AEW Fright Night, which occurred at the Burt Ogden Arena in Edinburg, Texas. So that's something, a show that I liked. I enjoyed the show. I felt like I've had some gripes over the past couple of weeks, but now I thought this was a solid show that was filled with some really good wrestling, some excellent wrestling on top of that. I don't think I have many complaints. I don't think I have a bunch of stuff to complain about. So we might as well just talk about the attendance and get going here. 3,030 tickets were distributed according to WrestleTix. It is what it is when it comes to AEW. It's not a bad gate, not terrible at all. We can, like I've been saying for the past couple of weeks in regards to attendance, I don't have much to add as far as analysis goes, because it's the same story week after week. And I don't know what more there is to add, quite frankly, right now, until there's like a significant change. AEW's weekly television taping attendance, it is what it is. It's not good. It's not good. It's not great. And for all of the great numbers that they do for their pay-per-view attendance, it's wild that they cannot translate that into a higher, more sustainable number for their weekly television. it's a bit of a mystery to me. So it still maintains that on that level. I don't have much to add, quite frankly, at this point. So we might as well start talking about the show. Honestly, there goes the mask. We're getting rid of the mask, which was a fun little bit. I think we all had a good chuckle, a little surprise starting up the video with Warren, in a mask and whatnot. But yeah, for prolonged use, it is absolutely not for me. Not when I'm going to be sitting here talking about stuff this much. I need to have free reign. I need to feel like I am unfettered and unshackled, not held back by any overbearing articles of clothing like a mask. And out the gate, the very first thing we get is a match. Not a promo, not a talk segment, not a contract signing. We get Darby Allin and Orange Cassidy defeating Daniel Garcia and Wheeler Yuta in a tornado tag match, tornado rules, and this was a lot of fun. I thought this was a really good match that got everyone really excited and spilled into the audience. And here's the kind of stuff that we were dealing with. Like, sometimes I think someone has to tell Darby, hey, Darby, you don't have to go this hard necessarily on television, but, probably some people tell him and he just ignores it. He does this, one of his crazy suicide dives, one of the, they call it a suicide dive, but Darby puts the suicide back in suicide dive. He does one of those onto Wheeler Yuta, who's sitting on a chair. He does a massive drop kick off of the ramp. He dives off the balcony when they're fighting into the audience. Wheeler Yuta does a big splash off of the top rope through a table, which was, there was all these crazy big spots. I was like, holy shit, like this is going really, really hard for just an episode of Dynamite. But look, at the same time, as I sometimes say, if one of the reasons that you're having trouble getting people into the buildings is because they never know what they're going to get, well, if you can light things up and show them that, like, look, you're going to get this kind of wild excitement every week kind of thing, well, then you're a little more inclined maybe to buy a ticket. There's this one spot, which was, I guess, a little unfortunate, is that Daniel Garcia missed his timing, or at least, he mistimed breaking up a pin after Darby Allin did the coffin drop on Wheeler Yuta, and Yuta had to kick out, which was I would say probably the best thing to do, right? As opposed to the referee, knowing that this isn't the finish, doing a 1, 2, and then doing a 3, and then, oh no, look, the shoulder was like up by a quarter of an inch. It's like, it could have become a much more ridiculous looking situation. But Daniel Garcia clearly was late. And, it turns out like the effect ultimately, while it was probably the best outcome and avoided a really awkward looking kick out or, referee miscount or whatever, the outcome is Wheeler Yuta kicked out of Darby's finisher, and that's probably a little problematic, but I feel like it's not as problematic as, everything just looking dopey. I can't blame Yuta for doing what he did there. I thought that was fine. And look, Wild Brawl was a lot of fun. Darby Allin wins by locking Wheeler Yuta into a sharpshooter or a scorpion deathlock or a darkness scorpion to get the win. So, yeah, that was a lot of fun. I mean, Orange Cassidy was involved here, but Darby was stealing the show on this one. This was all the Darby Allin show. Orange Cassidy did dive onto Garcia through a table, but I mean, like, that was, I don't want to say that was it, because he did contribute. He did Orange Cassidy things in the match. He wasn't not present, but the most memorable, spectacular things, it was all Darby all the time in this one. Backstage, we have okay, focus. We cut backstage to see Hook arriving. He's got a lot of luggage. Have you noticed? Like, I'm like, man, this kid does not travel light. And basically, he hypes up his match for later in the night, the main event, where he has the opportunity to be the number one contender for the AEW Men's World Championship. Basically, he's saying, I've got to fight 3 people, including Samoa Joe. And he says, I'm going to do my best to make sure that you don't advance. We have Renee Paquette talking with Don Callis backstage. He starts to talk and calls over the Bucks. He says, yeah, he talks about the fact that he's invited the Bucks to join the family before and the Bucks had declined. But he says, look, we're a family. We're here to support each other. And I'm going to make sure you guys are treated well here, just like Don Callis can do. And tells him, like, I'm going to give you a proper introduction, your proper entrance. I'm going to get that all set up. And he proceeds to do exactly that. The Bucks follow next to get to the ring. So their music is playing. Don Callis appears on the Tonytron to introduce them and put them over big time, and they get the big time pyro. Look, if this is the evolution of the Bucks being broke and whatnot, and we're not doing the, oh, look, they're messing up the presentation anymore, but it's actually being used to go somewhere, to have a story that leads us somewhere, which is, again, involving Don Callis. I'm completely fine with that. And that leads us to the 4-way number 1 contenders match that was won by FTR. They defeated Jet Speed, Jurassic Express, aka Dino 210, and the Young Bucks. I thought this match was great. I thought it was great. Like, this was your PWG party match right here. Like, there's no other way to describe it. Everyone was getting their shit in. There were these great sequences. It was a little funny at times, but the action was really, really solid from everyone. We even have Dax Harwood superplexing Kevin Knight off of the top rope all the way to the floor. Mike Bailey has this great little, this short little moment with the Bucks where he's dodging a super kick party, which was tremendous as well. The Young Bucks hit a shatter machine. Kevin Knight eats the BTE trigger, but he kicks out. But then shortly thereafter, FTR hit the shatter machine on Kevin Knight and get the win. So they are now your number 1 contenders for the AEW World Tag Team Championship, which of course is still held by Brodito, which will probably be a match at Full Gear. In fact, it will be a match at Full Gear. And I'm okay with that. And I would even argue that I'm okay with FTR ending the Brodito reign. I think FTR is extremely good right now. I think that this is the best they have been in their entire run in AEW. I think their heel gimmick is spectacular. I think they've been doing an extraordinary job with it. They are really, really fun. They should be walking around with gold and be the top guys of the company. That's exactly what I think we should be looking for at this point. Brodito's a great act, don't get me wrong, and you don't have to have them split up. They don't have to separate here. Far from it. I think it's a very successful tag team, even though you do have an impression that Tony does see singles potential a lot in Bandito. You feel like he really wants to push Bandito. Look at the little vignette they had with Bandito's grandmother, which was the most fucking wholesome thing that AEW has done in such a long time. It's basically a behind the scenes of Bandito's family, in particular, with a focus on his grandmother coming to see him wrestle, and she's saying how proud she is that she never gets to see him wrestle and whatnot. Like it, and he's standing there and he's holding her, he's hugging her, and she looks looks completely enamored and in love with her grandson. Like, it was tremendous stuff. I really think Tony has some plans here that will be on their way. And maybe the Bandito breakup will happen as they lose the titles. Look, time will tell, but I wouldn't be upset if FTR won the titles. I really wouldn't. I think it's a good time to do that, in fact. Next, we had the Don Callis Family Summit, which was basically all of the members of the Don Callis family. I remember most of them, right? Trent Beretta was not there. Andrade was not there. Basically all coming to the ring to sort of talk it out, hash it out. Sort of a show by Don Callis to demonstrate that the family is united, and this talk about there being dissent, especially between Takeshita and Okada, is ridiculous, right? And everyone is there, but Konosuke Takeshita is notable for not being present. They had little name tents, the little cardboard name tents, on the table where everyone should be seated, and Konosuke's was there, but his seat was empty. They said, Don Callis said, some people can't be here due to injury or travel problems. You're like, okay, that's kind of weird that Takeshita didn't make the town, but okay. It's not as if, like New Japan right now is right in the midst of the Super Junior Tag League. So, he's not committed to anything happening in New Japan right now. Did you notice how much of a reaction Hechicero got from the Texas crowd? That was pretty interesting to me. Anyway, there's talk and they're exchanging, platitudes and pleasantries until Konosuke Takeshita's music hits. He gets to the ring and, he's stoic and, he's staring down Okada, and Okada gets up from his seat as he starts making his way over, and they just stare at each other. And immediately Don Callis is between them both, trying to keep them away from both of them, basically saying, look, I wanted to create an environment of nothing but alphas. Look at this. I called you the alpha, but look at this group here. It's a group of alphas now. You were my first. Everything started with you, and this is where we're at, kind of thing. So, and he doesn't want things to get out of control. He wants to disarm the situation. So he's telling Takeshita, look, brother, shake Okada's hand, and he's very reluctant to do it because there is clearly tension and bad blood between them both. Takeshita, like Callis said, you're the alpha, but I want you to shake his hand, and he's insisting on Takeshita, doing these gestures, as opposed to Okada, where he doesn't say anything to Okada. So you kind of see where this is going, where Callis keeps, poking and prodding at Takeshita, and eventually Takeshita does extend his hand, and you saw this coming a mile away. Instead of shaking Takeshita's hand, Okada fakes out and flips him the bird, and that gets everything very hot and bothered. And then Don Callis makes a match for a collision, a tag team match between the two, so that they can show that they can indeed work together. I gotta say, I've got to say here, oh, and of course there was a portrait, right? Forgot to mention the portrait, which was, extraordinary once again. Great work. Great work by Mel Coleman once again. But the one thing I want to point out, though, and I think it's important to point out how great of a job Don Callis has been doing here, creating this feud and giving it tension between two guys who are not native English speakers. Like, he has essentially been doing all of the storytelling for this entire feud between the two. Like, the two, Soup and Okada, do their talking when they're in the ring, when they are having miscommunications or, being upset at each other. That's where they do the most of their talking. But as far as like creating the foundations for a feud and keeping it, stoking the flames and making us understand really where what path we're on right now, this has been all Don Callis. And he has been so good in this role of just maintaining the heat of everything that they're doing. Like it's tremendous. I'm impressed. I'm actually extremely impressed because I think someone lesser than Dawn would struggle to get this feud over as much as he does, but he's just it's borderline genius level how great he is in this role. Anyway, so did I mention Takeshita and Okada get pulled they get pulled apart before anything physical happens, and I kind of had the feeling that the Don Callis family was split on, into two factions here, and it's like one side, like the Takeshita side seemed to be a little irritated at the Okada side and vice versa, so might be going a little deeper than this. Just like two guys feuding. It might be going a little deeper. We get a sizzle reel for CMLL's Olympia, who will be challenging Mercedes Moné for the CMLL Women's World Championship on Collision this week. And Olympia's a big, strong lady. I think you got that right. Renee Paquette is backstage interviewing Chris Statlander. Says she'll be at ringside for Moné versus Olympia, but she's going to set out and look for Mercedes Moné tonight because she knows that she is in the building. Jon Moxley and Kyle O'Reilly went to a double countout in their rematch from last week, which was a really great match. And this was, look, a strong, striking, technical style match that once again, I should say, Kyle O'Reilly was given a lot to work with, and Mox was really in response mode here. He wasn't as in control as he usually is. Just like last week, leads into this one here, and Mox is having a little trouble, staying in control. He's obviously terrified about being in a situation where he'll have to tap or quit again. I thought this was very good. And the match comes to an end when the fight spills to the floor, and Kyle O'Reilly locks in a guillotine on Moxley, and the referee, I think it's Aubrey, right? I think it was Aubrey. She counts all the way to 10 with both guys on the floor in the guillotine. So that brings a halt to the match. And look, Moxley can't put Kyle O'Reilly away. So what is the story exactly we're trying to tell here? It's very interesting. Because, Mox is a main eventer. Kyle O'Reilly is, he's a mid-card guy, a solidly, lower end mid-card guy who never wins his matches. He won last week by DQ. Now it's a double countout. It's not, we're not exactly setting the world on fire here, but this was a good match. I preferred last week's match to this one. I thought last week's had a lot more fire to it. Not that this was bad. I thought it was a very, very good match, but last week just had, it had energy to it. There was a fire to it. This was didn't feel quite as poignant, I guess, but a sound match. Very good. I'm nitpicking here. I'm just saying, which one did you prefer? I preferred last week's nonetheless. After the match, Marina Shafir slugs Aubrey Edward for doing the double countout. Aubrey drops like a sack of potatoes. And then the rest of the Death Riders join in until Roderick Strong, Darby Allin, Mark Briscoe, and Orange Cassidy come for the save. And then Mark Briscoe calls them out as fake-ass tough guys and challenges them to blood and guts through Orange Cassidy, who really didn't want to say it, but ended up saying it. Blood and guts specifically. So that's going to be your men's blood and guts match. The Conglomeration and Roderick Strong versus the Death Riders. Interesting. It's an interesting group of people, particularly on the babyface side, where I immediately think that and Darby Allin as well is going to be in there. So So, thinking about all of this, it's like, well, Darby and Mark Briscoe are going to be perfectly suited for a blood and guts type of match. Everyone else, I'm just wondering how this is all going to go. The Death Riders, they're all ready to shed their blood for pro wrestling, so it shouldn't be that big of a, I'm not as worried as, worried's the wrong word. I'm not questioning the Death Riders setup as much as I'm questioning the conglomeration in Darby and Roderick Strong. That I'm not as sure about, and I feel like this is the first year where I don't feel like there has been any real hatred behind the participants. Yes, they've been building to this. Yes, it's been an ongoing feud, but I never felt like the feud escalated to, like, between the conglomeration and the Death Riders. I never felt like it escalated to the point where we needed this, where it needed to be blown off with a blood and guts match. Whereas in the past couple of years, you've had different iterations of it, but it all felt earned. This year feels a little forced, just a little more forced. And I think it's mainly because, in my thought here, because the conglomeration are just perceived as lower mid-carders who don't stand a chance, right? Look, everyone loves Mark Briscoe, but Mark Briscoe never wins the big one, right? So we're not exactly seeing him as a serious candidate. I see him in this match. I'm going, well, Mark is going to make this entertaining, don't get me wrong, but there's no gravitas in this in regards to him being in this match and spilling some blood. If MJF was in this match, that might be a little different, but it's just missing something. Darby Allin, he's got his, he's still fresh off of his feud with Mox, and he's been still going after the Death Riders. It's fine, I guess, but I already feel like Darby and Mox has been blown off. It doesn't feel earned. I feel like the build to it has been strange, mostly because, like I said, the conglomeration are clear mid-carders, and, they lose a bunch. Roderick Strong and Kyle O'Reilly, they lose tons of matches. Orange Cassidy came back, but he lost his first match coming back. It's like, there's nothing here that makes you feel like we're really sinking our teeth into it. I don't know. I'm sure it'll be entertaining, but it doesn't. It's lacking that. It's lacking that hype. It's lacking that. It's lacking that spark that would really put it over, right? Now, I've seen a lot of people be upset at the fact that there hasn't been the women's blood and guts match that's been announced, that everyone is waiting for, especially ever since Jamie Hayter, like, right out, called it out, right, and challenged the Triangle of Madness to fight her and her people in the blood and guts. But we haven't had any announcement. Nothing happened, and I think it would have been a good moment to announce it, last night on Dynamite, but they didn't. And I'm wondering how much this has to do with Penelope Ford injuring her arm, which, she has. Look, it's a pretty bad injury. A UCL tear is, it's the pitcher's injury, right? It's something that she said she'll be gone indefinitely. And I'm like, yes, she will. Because that's a bastard to come back from. So I wish her well. I hope she heals up fast and can get back to it as soon as she can. But of course, this derailed the plan for the tag team tournament. That's one thing. But maybe it also derailed stuff for the blood and guts match. And Tony is he's proven to be very prudent when it comes to his booking of the women's division. he said multiple times, I've been waiting for the right, I'm waiting for the right moment, waiting for the right people. He's always like, he wants the best possible environment in which to have the women's division do things, right? Like these tag titles, he's had them for so long at this point that it was a wonder he didn't pull the trigger before, but he was saying, look, the timing's not right. The timing's not right. He's very, very careful when it comes to the women's division and how he books it, which is to his credit, but also maybe he's playing it a little too safe. If this is the circumstance where he's like, look, I want to give it some time to breathe, I need to think about it or whatever, like it's one person. Like he already figured out what to do. Let me rephrase this. Let me recontextualize this. He's already figured out what to do in the tag team tournament. He just swapped out Penelope Ford for Marina Shafir with Mox's blessing, which was a tremendous bit, by the way. So we already swapped her out there. So what would Penelope Ford being out of Blood and Guts be so essential that he's avoiding announcing it? You know what I mean? What I can't imagine Penelope Ford being at the center of your entire booking process for this match. It's not as if you're booking a world championship match and Chris Statlander suddenly gets injured. Now I'm just like, okay, now we're fucked. Now we're really in a pickle here. And it's just Penelope Ford. So, like on one hand, I'm telling myself, well, Tony does have a tendency to be careful with his booking of the women's division. But then on the other hand, I'm like, just swap out a body. It doesn't matter. It's like, it really, does it really matter all that much? And to be frank, and this is probably not the popular opinion, but to be honest, I'm not super into the idea of 2 Blood and Guts matches on the same show. Like, these are long ass matches. They're long matches, and they can be a hit or they can be a complete dud. And it's like in WWE, while I was still watching, and when they do the double war games, right? The women's match and the men's match, I'm like, why are we doing both? Because then one suffers necessarily in regards to the other. Because one is going to have the opportunity to do the big spots, and the other one, the one that comes before the other one, the one that comes before will not have those opportunities because all of the big spots will be kept for the one that closes the show. You see what I mean? Yeah, does that make sense? Now, I know everyone wants the women's Blood and Guts, and I understand it, but I don't know how into it I am. I don't know if I want to sit down and watch 2 30-minute or at least 20-plus minute cage matches on Dynamite next week. Like, it's something that doesn't get the juices flowing for me. I think I have many, many reservations in that regard before I come out strong and say, yes, let's go ahead and do it, because there's so much precedent of having two of these matches per card. 2 of these big gimmick matches on the card, having 2 of them, it's a little exhausting. I think it's the same thing with the Royal Rumble. Personally, having 2 Royal Rumbles is very exhausting, and and then my point of one of the matches suffering because the second match, usually the one that comes after, usually gets all the big spots. It's particularly true in Royal Rumble matches. And look, we'll see what they do here. I don't know what the right, I think they should have just gone out and say, look, especially, I'm trying to say too many things at once here, especially when you consider that the men's Blood and Guts match feels a little forced. Why not just go with the women? Why not just have one Blood and Guts match and it's the ladies this year who handle it? Wouldn't that have been a good solution? Because the conglomeration and Darby and Roderick Strong versus the Death Riders, it feels shoehorned. It doesn't feel deserved. And I feel like there's enough. I feel like Tony has been establishing many like rivalries and connections between all of the women over the past few months that it would all sort of make sense. But I don't think it feels deserved either. Like, I don't think either blood and guts match in either scenario ultimately feels deserved. Feels like a blow-off point, if that makes sense. Anyway, those were my thoughts in that regard. Mercedes Moné and Chris Statlander are brawling. They're backstage, and it spills out into the arena, of course. And Athena joins in to double team Chris Statlander. She hits the O-face after Moné hits a backstabber, and Willow Nightingale and Harley Cameron run in for the save. Of course, with the emphasis on Willow and Statlander's history being a little odd. However, Harley and Willow are facing Athena and Moné in the first round of the women's World Tag Team title tournament. So it did make sense for them to make the save and get squeeze a little juice out of that. We get the Bandito video package that I talked about earlier that came up next. And then the Sisters of Sin, which are Julia Hart and Sky Blue, defeated Jamie Hayter and Queen Aminata to move on to the semifinals of the AEW Women's Tag Team Tournament. This was fine. I thought it was good, but it lacked a sense of urgency overall. And, there's a lot of people who are surprised at the result. When I talked about when I previewed the tournament on stream, I outright said, look, I think this one could potentially go either way. I would prefer Hayter and Aminata to move forward, but if you're doing, because I kind of think Willow and Harley are going to have an upset and they're going to defeat Athena and Moné when they finally fight. So you'll probably want to have a heel team to fight Willow and Harley. So that makes a lot of sense. So to me, it's making the case even harder that Willow and Harley are winning, are beating Moné and Athena. But it also makes sense because I feel like Julia Hart and Sky Blue, since they've been partners in a team for so long, they should be able to defeat a tag team that was just thrown together recently. Like, that also makes a lot of sense. Now, is this my preferred team? No. I think we would have probably got better matches out of Hayter and Aminata, but look, it is what it is. I think Sky Blue I find is still very awkward, and Julia Hart is very limited still. Like, she doesn't have we don't like Julia Hart because of her work rate. Let's put it that way. So, it is, like I said, it is what it is. They move forward. It makes sense as far as the tournament goes. Will we get some good matches out of it? Well, then we get the backstage segment where Tony Schiavone, who is dressed as the Phantom of the Opera, or at least has the mask on, right? Calling back to, which is clearly a callback to that Halloween Havoc. I can't remember which one, where he was dressed as the Phantom of the Opera. Right, on Blue Sky, I posted of him and Brad Armstrong from that show. Anyway, so this is the segment where they announced that Penelope Ford will not be able to compete, that she tore her UCL, and that's when Marina Shafir shows up to basically join up with Megan Payne, and Mox is being giddy about it, which was a great bit. Look, Mox putting over the women's division like that is tremendous. And then we get the main event where Samoa Joe defeats Hook, Bobby Lashley, and Ricochet to become the number one contender for the AEW Men's World Championship. I thought this was good. I thought this was pretty good. Solid match. I think the guy who slowed things down, who dragged things down, is Hook. I can appreciate that he was thrown into this. There was connective tissue with Joe. I appreciate why they did it. And look, the kid has to be put in these types of situations if he's going to improve and so on and so forth. You know, he wasn't carrying this all alone. But look, Hook right now is not connecting with the audience. When he's T-boning Samoa Joe, and the crowd really isn't all that into it. Whereas you have, you know, Bobby Lashley and Samoa Joe doing power moves on each other. The crowd is into it. Ricochet doing high-flying moves, and he was spectacular once again. MVP of this match, quite frankly. Just giving everything to everyone, getting his shit. And that segment that he did where, you know, he did dives and like a Sasuke special, and that was phenomenal stuff. Ends with him doing, I think, a shooting star press onto Hook. It was just tremendous stuff. But despite all of that, in fact, because of that, the crowd was into it. But Hook just doesn't have a crowd connection with the audience that is as strong as the three other guys are. I thought when he was doing stuff, it was just run of the mill. People weren't really into it. They weren't reacting, and it is what it is. I think the repackage that they did with him is not successful. You know, I like his music. I like his entrance music. I like JJ Johansson. I really do. But I don't think it's working for him. Like, I don't think it's not getting people excited. There's an element missing here, and I can't quite put my finger on it, but there's absolutely still something missing. And I feel we're getting there, but we're still a long way there. We're not like, oh, we're on the cusp. You know, it's not like it's not like when they started giving the mic to Kyle Fletcher, where you're like, oh shit, he's a little rough, but we're really, really close. You know, now it's like, oh shit, Hook is very, very rough, and he's got a long way to go. And for his crowd connection too and whatnot, there was a time Hook had a bigger crowd connection than this. He legitimately did. Anyway, Joe hits the Kakina clutch on Hook for the win, and then the rest of the Ops come out to celebrate with him, and there's this whole setup where, you know, Tony Schiavone, he's like emceeing all of this stuff, and he says, we're going to sign the contract now. And they have fans in costumes come out, right, to bring the contract so that he can sign it. And it's like, what? And you have a chicken, you have a guy dressed in black, and then you have the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. Now, what you're supposed to be thinking here is the one time where Hangman Page dressed up as the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man to attack the Bucks a few years ago. This is what it's supposed to remind you of. Samoa Joe in the Ups is like, nah. This is a setup. You know, he says, this is not a safe environment for me to sign a contract. So he and the Ops take out everyone who's in costumes, who obviously are not fans. They're all workers. And they even unmask the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, and it's not Hangman. They're like, oh, okay, so maybe we're a little paranoid. So he signs the contract. But it turns out that, and then Tony Schiavone enters the ring. He's still got his half mask, you know, and whatnot. It turns out Hangman Adam Page was disguised as Tony Schiavone, at least in that final bit. I don't know when they did the switch, but it actually was really, I thought it was really well done and elevated the segment, because I was about to write in my notes, so stupid we haven't seen the world champion at all in this, on this show. He turns up there, dressed up as Schiavone, like he removes the mask, he undoes his hair. It's like, holy shit. He's got like padding like around his waist to make like his thighs bigger, his ass bigger, give him a bit of a fupa. You know, I'm like, if I'm Tony Schiavone and I'm looking at all the padding that they put on Hangman, I'm like, hey, Wait a second. I'd be like, hey, wait a minute. Hang on a second. Why all this padding? Like, is it that bad? I'm like, oh, hold on a second here, pal. But look, I thought it was really well done. Hangman is in the ring. He's got a microphone and he's mouthing exactly what Shivani is saying, because Shivani is somewhere on a microphone, or maybe it's pre-recorded. I don't know, but he's delivering the lines. And Hangman is just like nailing them perfectly. Like, where it's like, this is kind of weird. Like, you feel like something is up, but the guy is talking like Shivani and he's saying exactly like, and he's mouthing perfectly. I'm like, what is going on? And then we get the reveal that it was Hangman. And I thought it was a nice twist. I thought it was clever. They pulled it off and it saved the segment, because at some point I was going, all right, come on. When they had all the beers in their hands, I was like, all right, let's move along. What are we doing here? Get the Hangman out. What exactly is going on here? Like, I think timing wise, it struggled a little bit, but ultimately the result was like, holy shit, this was actually really creative. This was really good. Like, this was actually something that was very, very creative. I'm okay with it. And Hangman, once it was time to go after Joe, he was pissed off and he went after it. Now, you can argue, should the Hangman be doing like convoluted, cutesy things like this? Should he be pulling that kind of stuff off? I'm like, well, yeah, I think it's kind of in his nature to do that when he's a babyface, because we've seen him do things like this before. So, it doesn't like throw me off terribly, and where it's like, oh, we should be doing this or not. It's like, I don't know. I thought it was really well done, and I think it was a fun way to end the show, and it ends with the pull apart brawl between Joe and Hangman, and I'm gonna celebrate by putting on my own Stetson. It's not really a Stetson, but hey, we're gonna end the review on that note. A good show, a good Dynamite. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good little Dynamite. I thought, look, much more focus on wrestling than nonsense. That will carry you. I don't know if it was last week where Tony Khan heard my complaints about the identity crisis, but this show felt like an AEW show. I don't know if it's the Jags, as someone pointed out to me on Blue Sky. I don't know if it's because the Jags had a bye this week, so Tony could focus on the show, but this felt a lot better than the past couple of editions of Dynamite. This was good. I enjoyed it. I thought it was very good. And I hope you enjoyed this review as well. If you did, leave a like, a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, or a 5-star rating on Spotify. And there you go. That's the review. That's what we do here. Subscribe if it's your first time here. Hit the bell gimmick. Go watch some Randy Orton and get back to me. And I'll see you next time.